Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning in to RadioFreeRhinecliff.org. In this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm, I'm your host, Norm, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Jillian Hanlon. Jillian, thanks for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Happy Friday.
It is a very happy Friday.
Yeah. Now, you are noteworthy in so many ways, but first and foremost, you're running for the office of Dutchess County Sheriff.
That's correct.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Here to add anything
I
to
corrected you,
and now you're done it. Correct me if I'm Norm. Why? Why are you running for that?
Well, I have more than 37 years of experience in all aspects of public safety. I was a paramedic, an interior firefighter, responsible for critical infrastructure protection. And for 24 years, I was with the sheriff's office. I was a corrections officer, and I was a deputy sheriff from 1999 onward. I've had an amazing career. I was the longest in the aggregate serving school resource officer. I was a public information officer for 12 years. I've developed numerous durable programs, such as our I've helped develop these programs. I can't take full credit because it's a team work, but it was my case, and I was responsible for developing the call workflow for our JFire program, which is our Juvenile Fire Setters Intervention, Response, and Education.
Oh, wow.
It's a non-punitive, multidisciplinary approach to the problem of youth fire setting. So if a child is experimenting with fire, people can make a referral to the sheriff's office, and that triggers trained individuals to come. We interview the child, we do an interview of the family, we do a fire safety inspection of the home, and we administer something called the Organ Tool, which is an evidence-based psychological assessment tool that we're all trained on that allows us to assess whether or not the child needs a higher level of care, or whether or not education and about fire safety and fire science is appropriate. And so the whole point is to make sure that the kids and families are safe in a non-judgmental and harm-reducing way. And
I mean, this is fascinating to me because when I was a kid, and I've got kids, I mean, everybody was fascinated with fire. And wanted to sit around and start fires, and like there was a candle, they would light things, on fire off of that. Where does that cross over into sort of becoming a problem?
Well, I mean, let's face it, fire is, fire is fascinating.
Yeah.
We all know the experience of staring into a fire or a candle. It's mesmerizing. It actually affects our brain waves, and it causes us to go to a place of calm. Children, and we have to remember that fire is both a tool as well as a technology. And just as we wouldn't want children to experiment with firearms or razor blades or gunpowder, we also don't want kids to experiment with fire, because it can easily get out of hand.
Right.
So what we're more concerned with is what's the context in which this happens.
Right. That makes sense. And is it does it skew by gender? Is it mostly boys?
I don't want to say that. Because I don't think there's any specific pattern. There's no specific gender, age group, or socioeconomic status that leads to one.
Gotcha.
Because we all want to experiment. We all want to experiment. So.
And so this program, what was it called?
It's called JFire.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. For juvenile.
Juvenile Fire Setter Intervention, Response, and Education.
That somehow is a part of the county sheriff's purview.
Yes. Well, it's a multidisciplinary approach. So county
multi-departmental sort of.
Yeah, emergency response is involved. Volunteer firefighters, arson investigators, probation officers, social workers with the Department of Behavioral and Community Health Services. So it's again, it's a multidisciplinary. We want to try and get as many bright minds at the table so that we can make sure that no matter what the situation, we can always apply the appropriate resources.
Right. Okay. Now you said a whole bunch of things, but one of them latched into my mind. It was critical infrastructure protection. What is that?
So, critical infrastructure consists of there are a number of different things defined by law. So, for instance, utilities are considered a form of critical infrastructure. Schools and buses are considered critical infrastructure, as are bridges. So my role in critical infrastructure protection is I worked for a year for the New York State Bridge Authority, where I was responsible for the security operation and helping develop the command center that we had there, which was a new initiative to prepare to go for cashless tolling, which we now have.
Right.
As a school resource officer, it was my responsibility to help schools develop school safety plans, and that included addressing the physical plant, any vulnerabilities there, vulnerabilities in screening programs, vulnerabilities in the actual procedures of a lockdown, as well as protecting bus routes and instructing bus drivers on ways to keep the kids more safe.
Right. Huh. And that's part of the school resource officer is part of the sheriff's department. Now, when I Google you, one of the things that comes up is in 2009 there was an attack, I guess you'd call it, on a school in Pine Plains. What was that all about? And I guess you were one of the first deputies on the scene. Yeah.
At that time, I was a school resources officer. I was assigned to the Pauling Central School District. And I was on my way to Pauling when the call came in.
From where?
From Pine Plains.
Oh.
So Pine Plains and Pauling are obviously two ends of it's like the antipodes of the county. And so this guy has a disassembled shotgun, and he sneaks it into the school, and then he goes in and he takes the middle school principal hostage. And so everything goes into a lockdown. 911 gets called, and I don't believe at that time there was a school resource officer assigned to Pine Plains Central Schools, but I believe the sheriff's office got the poll, and so we were assigned the call. I turned around and I went straight up there, and when I arrived, there were already 2 or 3 officers on scene, and they were beginning to set up the perimeter. And so I realized that what we needed to have set up was a command post. So I left the scene, and I went down and I located a business nearby that allowed us to use their phones and fax machine. And so I set up the command post, and once senior staff arrived to actually take control of the incident, I put on my other hat that day, which was Chief Information Officer. So,
right. And that's a job that you did for the Sheriff's Department for a long time.
Yes.
Chief Information Officer. And that's
Public Information Officer.
I was going to guess that's a liaison between what's going on in the Sheriff's office or with emergencies and the public and the press and stuff.
The PIO is really responsible for all forward-facing communications from whatever agency. So whether it's a fire department or the PIO works under what's called the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, and NIMS sets forth a protocol on how do we respond to incidents and events.
Right. And was that a good gig? Was that the entirety of your job at the time? You were the public information officer?
No, that was just one of the items in my portfolio at the time. Because I was also a school resource officer, and I had a lot of community policing initiatives, and I was doing a lot of teaching at that time as well.
Huh. And what kind of stuff were you teaching?
So I taught police mental hygiene law, which not only included New York State mental hygiene law and how it applies to police officers. But I also taught on how to de-escalate behavioral emergencies, and I taught on substance use and abuse. I taught the advanced first aid portion, so I had a number of different specialties that I taught. I taught juvenile law and procedures, and I taught community policing. I also, on a regular basis, I taught bloodborne and airborne pathogens.
Blood what?
Bloodborne and airborne pathogens.
Yes. So that's a lot of stuff to have some kind of expertise in. I guess you had to have something before you taught these classes.
Yeah, it was for like bloodborne, airborne, and the other occupational safety stuff I did, like the respirators. That was a natural outgrowth of my experience as a paramedic and my experience with interior firefighting. So everything that I've done really kind of informs everything that I do.
Right. So paramedic, that's not in the sheriff's department.
No. In New York State, there are several different levels of advanced pre-hospital care. I was an AEMT 4 paramedic, which was the highest level.
Okay. And that's a bootload of training as well, right?
Yeah. I was at the time. I was also ACLS certified, so
which is
advanced cardiac life support. So basically, what my job was as a paramedic was I ran a mobile intensive care unit, and so I did primarily high risk ground transports between hospitals.
Okay. So how did you get into all of this stuff? I mean, it's in its entirety, it's just so much experience, but it's all sort of in, public safety realm. When you were a little kid, were you interested in?
I was. I loved the show Emergency.
Oh, you did?
I did. I love the show Emergency.
Can you hum the theme song?
No, I can't.
All right.
I can't. But I can always remember the radio tones. That would set it off. And, I got to tell you, being able to flip the caps off one of those Abiject syringes, just like Johnny Gage and Roy did, that was always very, very cool to do.
And so you saw this thing in the TV show, and eventually you were in a class, and you're like, oh, my God, this is where they flipped the tops off.
Well, I always wanted to be involved in some kind of public service, public safety. And I think I was in 4th grade when I was watching Emergency, and it inspired me to carry around a little first aid kit on my bike.
That's so cute. And where was that? Where were you riding your bike around?
I grew up in Claverick, New York.
Okay.
Just outside Hudson.
Claverick.
Not Claverack.
Claverack. Well, I'll just have to say it my way from now on. Claverack. Claverick. And you lived there throughout your youth?
Yeah.
And then did you go to study these things somewhere?
So the first time I took the EMT course, I failed. And that was a really important lesson for me because I realized after that I needed to really apply myself and take it seriously. The next time I took it, I did very, very well. And I had dropped out of college in my junior year, and I needed to really do something. And because I loved EMS so much, I decided to forego a career in radio and become a paramedic.
Radio? What were you doing?
In college, I was part of our college radio station, and I'd actually gotten accepted to a broadcasting school. But I realized that I did not want to spend my life working midnights in Kansas for 20 years before I could.
Is that how it goes? You go to the broadcasting school, and you take whatever job you can find somewhere and hope you can move back east?
You build up your repertoire and your audience, and then you just keep trying to find new gigs to get to where you want to be.
Right.
And ultimately, the goal is to get into a major media market. And serving the public was so much more fun, so much more rewarding.
Now, and of all of those jobs that you did, which ones were the most rewarding? I'd
have to say EMS and police work.
Mm-hmm. And police work, which was all of it was in the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office.
Yes,
as a deputy sheriff.
That's correct.
And did you do patrol stuff as well?
I did. So I graduated in '99 from the Kingston Police Academy.
Right here in Kingston, New York?
In Kingston, New York. The current chief of the City of Kingston Police, Egidio Tenti, he was our academy director.
Uh-huh.
Amazing guy. Just absolutely an amazing guy. And so I was elected class president. I graduated with top academic honors, and I was first out learning the streets on what was that, the 2000, when the millennium was happening, and everybody was afraid that the computers were all going to crash.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember being afraid. I remember somebody said, oh, yeah, the NYPD ordered like 1 million body bags. And I was like, what? That sounds horrible. Yeah,
they don't go bad.
That's a sad thought. Body bags don't go bad. So you said also you were an interior firefighter.
I was trained to do interior firefighting.
So I'm guessing that's self-explanatory. But I had no idea that there were different skill sets.
Yeah. So that's like the very first thing you learn how to do when you become a firefighter.
Is interior.
Is interior. You learn how fire works, how it spreads, how to keep yourself safe. How to apply or don all of your safety equipment, such as your turnout gear and your SCBA breathing apparatus.
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of science and there's a lot of practical work that you have to learn how to do. So
right.
I was on the jail's fire team as well as with Armenia Fire Department.
Amenia. And so did you, I guess you probably saw a bunch of fires and rushed into it.
I saw enough to realize that it's too much like work and too much like danger for me, and I don't really want to be a firefighter. It is really hard work, and it is really, it's long. Fires take hours to do, and you have to carry people up and down stairs, and I did that when I was a medic, and I can understand human behavior, but I can't understand how a fire goes through a building that I have no idea how it was built. Right. So I would much rather take my chances with somebody who is in crisis or looking to do harm than a building, where force of nature is running through it. Right. Now, somebody in crisis, it's a segue to, the popular thought, I'm going to say what it was called because I hate the title that goes along with it, is to move some resources from the police out of, new trucks and guns and stuff and into things that can help people in crisis. It's really funny. It's really funny that you should mention that because one of the finest leaders I've ever had the pleasure of working under, Lieutenant Sean Castano, is retiring from the sheriff's office after I think 30 years. Dutchess County Sheriff, DCSO, yeah. Next Friday, I believe, is his last day, and so we got, as a bunch of us retirees, we got the notification about his retirement party and encouraged to join. And of course, I would love to be able to wish my good friend and mentor well. And so I had responded about how one individual who was collecting the money wasn't in, but she would be back on Monday. And another individual took that opportunity to blast everybody on the email list and tell me that I should be ashamed of myself for being endorsed by the Working Families Party because they quote unquote defund the police. Oh yeah, that's the expression. Yeah. It's such a tragic way of talking about it is. The idea of putting mental health professionals on the front line with people who need them and don't need a cop with a gun. Well, there are groups like the Democratic Socialists of America that really believe that we spend far too much money on police and not enough on softer services like social services. I would agree that we may spend a little bit too much money on militarization. I think that the paradigm that was the case after 9/11 no longer holds true. We're not any longer in a global war on terror. We don't need our police to be warriors who approach every problem as a potential combat situation.
Right.
So there are two styles of policing. There's guardian, and then there's warrior. And I come from the guardian tradition, so I'm about community policing, helping communities protect themselves, build resiliency. Improve community police partnerships. I'm very big on harm reduction, and I think that those are the things that we need. There is certainly a place for the warrior who's going to, come down fast line off a Black Hawk helicopter, but if you approach every situation as if the other person is meaning to do you harm, then that is escalatory. And our role is to be helpers. It's to bring things down.
Right. So people are like, oh, good, the sheriff's here.
Yes.
Not like, oh my God, the sheriff's here.
That's right. I've always wanted it to be, thank God instead of, oh my God.
Yeah, that's good. So you're not saying it should all be guardian. You're saying that the mix should be weighted a little bit more towards guardian than warrior.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because, there are times that we have to do, no-knock searches.
Right.
I'm very pleased that the DOJ indicted those 4
I was just going to bring
police
that
officers
up in Louisville.
Because
Breonna Taylor, right?
Yeah, because 2 of them conspired in a garage, which meant that DOJ was already most likely had that garage surveilled. They knew that the 2 of them had met in this garage.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, because I watched the press conference.
And conspired to do what?
To change the police report to cover up.
I see. So they met in the garage.
There was no actual
incident.
reason for them to go to that address. These 2 cops decided to do it on their own, and then they tried to create documentation after the fact.
Oh my goodness. And now the Department of Justice is on the job. And
now the DOJ is on the job, and they're now looking at, they have a pattern and practice investigation against the Louisville Police Department now.
Right. Huh. So, that just makes me think of this like so-called blue wall of silence, that cops stick together. I mean, at least those 2 of them, sticking together, like coming up with their alibi and the story and what actually happened to exonerate their horrible actions. Did you experience any of that when you were on the job?
No, I don't want to say that. I think that the vast majority of officers, both in the jail and on the road, are ethical people who really want to keep the public safe and do the public good. The whole issue about there being a few bad apples, well, if you follow through with the saying, a few bad apples spoils the bunch. So you can't just say a few bad apples. You need to make sure that you identify those bad apples and remove them. Mm-hmm. We're the good guys. We should not be shooting people in the back as they run away with their arms up in the air screaming, please don't murder me.
Right.
There's no reason for that.
No.
I don't, unless that person actually is some kind of, serial killer or has a finger on a nuclear button. I mean, if they're running away, we have dogs. We have dogs to find them.
Right. Oof. So back to this guardian warrior thing. Because you talked about creating a more sort of just, sheriff's department and compassionate policing. What else does that mean? More compassionate policing, and actually the follow-up question: how is that different from what's happening now, from the status quo, the old boy sort of network that's in control right now of the sheriff's department?
Well, so in terms of compassion, let's take a look at correctional reform, for instance. All right. So we have had a correctional paradigm for many, many years, actually since the turn of the 19th century, when the reformers had gotten into Bedlam and exposed the inhumane treatment. So what we have is an old paradigm of punishment. And the notion is that somebody, if we make their experience in jail sufficiently unpleasant, they will learn their lesson and they will not come back. The problem with that is that the three primary drivers of crime and disorder are poverty, desperation, and trauma, specifically early childhood trauma. So when we arrest somebody, that's traumatic. When we put them in jail, that's traumatic. We pull them away from their family. That's traumatic. We take them out of society. That affects them economically and their family economically. It increases desperation. And then, while they're inside, we treat them poorly and inhumanely, and then we release them thinking that they're going to be somehow better. This makes no sense.
Right.
It's not humane.
No.
It's not humane. Inmates, regardless of what they have done, and some of them have done very, very bad things, they still have to be afforded dignity. And, I've survived some pretty bad things, and I still think that people have to have some measure of dignity afforded to them. It's what makes us human. Now, I want to be clear that compassion it's empathy. It's being able to understand another person's emotional state and to identify with that. But it's also combined with a sincere desire to help, right? If you're just empathetic and using that as a tool to get somebody to calm down, that's manipulative. We need to apply that empathy with a sincere desire to help. Because once you do that, then you don't see people as the other. You don't see them as less than.
Right.
And you don't end up in situations where you shoot people in the back while they're running away from you.
Right. But, people are still going to get arrested and sent to jail.
Of course.
And they're still going to have that horrible experience. When compassion isn't weakness and it's not coddling, because think about this. The surgeon shows compassion by plunging the knife into the body and removing the offending organ. And when the surgeon is done sewing you up, you don't feel so good. Right.
There is some suffering that is inherent into the process. But from a humanistic point of view, our job is to minimize the unnecessary suffering that goes along with it. So, consider this. People don't commit crimes with the expectation that they're going to get caught. They commit a crime primarily because they sense an opportunity and they make a very quick calculation in their head if they can get away with it.
Right.
It is not the length of the sentence that comes into play unless you're talking about crime rings who actually do a cost-benefit analysis and work it into the cost of their doing business. Crime
rings, right.
So our job, if we really want to stop crime and disorder, we make it so that people know that they're going to get caught, right? Because if they know they're going to get caught, they're going to have a real disincentive. Now, once we get them, if they come to our facility, I want to make it so that they don't come back. But I don't make it so that they're so traumatized.
Right.
But so that they gain skills to be successful in society.
So what else do you do to make it so they don't come back?
Well,
and you're talking about the Dutchess County Jail here.
Yes.
Which is overseen by the Dutchess County Sheriff's Department.
Yes, it's one of the three things that we do.
Oh, what are the three things you do?
So
they won't go back.
Yeah, so we're also responsible for our law enforcement function. So we patrol all of Dutchess County. We don't actively patrol Poughkeepsie or the city of Beacon, but because the town and the city of Poughkeepsie and the city of Beacon have their own full-time municipal police departments.
Gotcha.
So we actively patrol the rest of the county with state police and with other smaller agencies, for instance, Hyde Park or Red Hook or Rhinebeck.
Yeah, Rhinebeck's got a small police department.
Yep.
So
that's the other thing. And so part of our law enforcement function includes we have a number of specialty units, such as our Marine Patrol, such as our we had a bicycle unit, we have an ATV unit, we have a UAV unit, crisis negotiation unit.
UAV?
Unmanned aerial vehicle.
Okay.
Right, so drones.
The drone department.
So yeah, we have drone pilots.
So that's two, the jail and patrol. What's the third function of that?
We have a civil process function where we carry out the orders of a court. So if you are suing your next door neighbor because their dog keeps pooping on your lawn and you need the paper served, you come to us, right? And then we serve the papers. And then when you win a gazillion dollars, right, you come to us, and then pursuant to a court order, we could recover that money. We also do evictions, we do tax liens, and asset seizures, etc.
Okay.
But it's all subject to court order.
Okay. So back to the jail.
Back to the jail.
What steps can be taken to stack the deck that people don't come back, to lower the rate of recidivism, I guess?
Well, so one thing we can do, when we take somebody in, they're obviously not able to work. Now, the majority of people who come into our jail are not doing, high skill jobs that require, advanced education or advanced technical skill. They tend to come from jobs where there's a lot of churn anyway. But when we take somebody out of that, it can leave an impression with their employer that the individual is unreliable. And they may very well be. But if we can help them learn how to be more reliable when they leave, I think we could have a job bank so that the same employers who are looking for people to do work and those same employers who experience a lot of churn, they have a ready stream of applicants that they can pull from.
And right now seems like a great time to do that because people are looking for employees.
Right.
Huh. And does any of that happen right now in the jail?
Not to my knowledge. I do know that we have a restart program, which is really focused on rehabilitation and treatment.
Right.
Which is what the new Justice and Transition Center will be focused on. It'll be really a state-of-the-art new facility.
Justice in Transition Center.
And Transition Center.
Justice and Transition. So it's not being called the Dutchess County Jail.
No, its proper name is the JTC, or Justice in Transition. It's a jail. It's a correctional facility, but the focus is not on a punitive approach, but rather on a rehabilitative one, a more humane environment. And I'm really proud to say that I was able to influence the design of the building in my own way.
When you were working with the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, just prior to my retirement, I was assigned to the JTC transition team, and so my job was as an analyst, and I did both economic and policy analysis for the team.
Right.
So, for instance, I predicted the impact of COVID before anybody else did, and
in the county or in the Sheriff's Department.
Yeah. So, and I was dismissed because Fox News and it's just the flu and whatever. But the very last day that we had to obtain N95 masks from New York State Emergency Services, we had to have both a policy on respirator use as well as people who were fit tested for them.
Fit tested.
Fit tested, yes, because depending on the respirator, you have to make sure that it seals properly. And
Gotcha.
so that's called fit testing. You can do qualitative and quantitative. But with an N95, that's a qualitative. We use like a sucrose or a bitter spray. And then they wear a hood, and then we can tell whether or not the mask is fitting properly to them.
Okay.
So they would not give, New York State would not give the sheriff's office these life-saving masks if we did not have a respirator program. And so after many years of complaining that we don't have a respirator program and trying to get money in the budget for it, on the very last day, they asked me to produce a respirator policy.
In like 24 hours?
In like 6 hours.
Oh, jeez.
So I went back. I had a model policy that I had been trying to get implemented for years. We secured some qualitative testing equipment. I trained a group of people how to do fit testing, and then we set off and we trained more than 100 officers that first day, both on the deputy side as well as the jail side.
And then you put together the grant or whatever to the state to get the mask?
No, that was already in process, and I believe it was going through Department of Emergency Response.
Right.
But there were conditions on the aid coming into the county.
And one of the was that they had these things that you did
that you needed
in six hours.
Because there are specific federal OSHA regulations that govern how respiratory protection is to be done.
Right. And so this is in 2020, I'm guessing, or maybe 2019.
It was 2020. I first realized it was going to be a problem in December of 2019 when I saw that the Chinese were building hundreds of hospitals a week. And I was like, the Chinese are doing this,
And we're just twiddling our thumbs and not taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And did the department sort of come along, toddle along, and say, "Oh, wait a minute, yeah, this is something, and we do need to"?
No, I think there was just so much informational segmentation, social segmentation, and misinformation early on that denialism had really taken root.
Right. So 2020, you had already transitioned by then. Is that correct?
That's correct. I started transitioning in 2015.
In 2015. So it was 5 years in the department of you transitioning during those 5 years. I can't imagine a place, and I've never been in law enforcement, but it seems like the kind of place that's not really nurturing and accepting and friendly to that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Cops aren't really known for being warm and fuzzy when it comes to sexual minorities.
Right.
But, it's a new century. It's a new millennium. It's the start of a new 1,000-year cycle. We're not in the same place that we were when I was 4 years old in 1970, and I realized that I should have been a girl. We're not in that same place. The majority of people support marriage equality. The majority of people support the right of transgender people to exist, regardless of some very angry and dangerous voices out there. We're just normal people living our lives, trying to live our best lives and be happy and be true to ourselves and the people we love.
And be the first openly trans sheriff in the United States.
Yes. So there was a trans woman up in New Hampshire who was a Satanist. who managed to get on the Republican.
Who was her campaign advisor?
I don't know. It was like some small county up there, and she was just basically trolling the Republicans. And so, she wasn't elected. But I'm the first to mount a serious campaign for sheriff.
And when did it go from sort of a pipe dream to a serious campaign?
Well, so I had never really considered running for sheriff, but after the previous sheriff, Butch Anderson, passed away, I realized that I could win the seat. And I don't think a Democrat has had the seat of sheriff in Dutchess County since the beginning of time. So, this is, I have a great deal of political experience. I was a labor union organizer, and I've worked on a number of political campaigns. So, I have a great number of people who are helping me, and some really smart people, very, very smart communications kinds of people.
Now, I suspect that the voting public kind of wants to vote for a warrior, and in your competition, this guy Kirk is Butch Anderson's, or it's his boy. I mean, he came up with Butch, and he was Butch's right hand man. Oh, yeah. And when you talk about the Old Boy Network, that's that. But I suspect people sort of want to vote for a warrior, just on some sort of visceral, emotional level. It's, oh, sheriff, I want that. Mayor, I want somebody who's more touchy-feely, whatever. What do you say to those people?
Well, first, I would say that my opponent is a decent human being. He's a family man. He loves his community. He goes to church. He contributes. I'm not going to say a bad thing about him. And in fact, after J.J. Thompson died,
who was
the previous undersheriff?
Okay.
Kirk, the current acting sheriff, was then made to be the undersheriff, and I actually helped write his very first campaign plan, because we needed to have that in place.
And you were the public information officer.
And I was the public information officer. And I've always been a Democrat, but I've always been able to reach across the aisle to people who have decency in them. And so, I'm not going to say anything bad about him, but I just don't think we need a dynasty. We don't need dead sheriffs choosing who our new sheriffs will be. And I don't think that there's a sufficient desire to really implement real reform in the current administration.
Reform such as what?
Well, such as correctional reform, such as being able to hire sufficient numbers of staff. We don't pay enough. We have a toxic work environment in the jail. And as a result, we're down more than 50 positions in the jail. Yeah.
That sounds really dangerous for everybody.
Well, I mean, we budget for 181 positions, but we're down more than 50.
And why? How does that even happen? I mean, it seems like for the jail, you'd need to keep the staff where it needs to be.
It's a vicious cycle. So New York State Commission of Correction sets forth what the minimum staffing should be. And they set it forth based on square footage and how many cells, and there's a whole formula that goes into it. And so we have to always have that much staffing present. Plus, whenever somebody goes on constant supervision because they might be a danger to themselves, that takes up an officer as well as a relief officer who now has to relieve that position. When somebody has to go to court, that takes officers. When somebody goes to the doctors or gets admitted to the hospital. And so what ends up happening is the correctional staff is forced to work 40, 60 hours of overtime a week.
Wait, so that's like an 80 to 100 hour week?
Yeah, yeah, and it's not reasonable. It's unsafe. Somebody's going to get into a crash driving home, or somebody's going to make a career or life-altering misjudgment. And plus, if you're that tired, how are you aware of your surroundings?
Right.
How can you be present?
So it sounds like a simple answer. You need to hire more corrections officers.
We need to hire more correction officers. We have to pay more. Problem is that a lot of people don't see corrections as a viable career. The pay is low, the hours are long, it's boring. I mean, you're babysitting
and maybe
adults.
Dangerous.
It is one of the most dangerous roles in law enforcement. Yeah, and in fact, it's dangerous in ways that you don't even expect it. Because when people retire from corrections, they have a tendency to die much earlier than other law enforcement officials.
Because it's a stressful job?
Because of the cumulative stress on the job, yeah. It shaves years off of CO's lives.
So how do you ever convince people that it's a viable career path?
It's problematic. From what I understand, the last test we had, we only had 75 people who were canvassable, and that's simply not a deep enough field to be able to pull people. So we're stuck in a vicious cycle where people can't stand to work the overtime. And even officers who are not ready to retire, but who are vested in the pension, are quitting just because they can't take it anymore. They're giving up their pension because they can't work there. That's unreal. That's unfair. That's not how we protect the public. That's not how we take care of good, hardworking people who put their lives on the line.
The corrections officers.
The corrections officers, absolutely. Huh. Absolutely. I talk a lot about dignity. I'm also an awful lot about dignity for the people who are putting themselves in harm's way for the rest of us.
Right.
They deserve more.
So how does this thing get fixed?
Well, there's a political problem. We need to do exactly the opposite of what the Republicans are confused about, and that is to increase funding for police services, because we need to be able to pay enough to recruit and retain qualified people. We also have to
police services and not sort of military grade toys.
Right. And there's certainly a place for that. There is, but when Timmy has lost his dog, an AR-15 isn't going to be helpful in that situation,
Right.
When grandma, managed to get the keys and now we don't know where she is, an armored personnel carrier isn't going to come save the day.
Right.
Right. If a child is struggling in school because of a chaotic home environment, we need people who are going to be able to be sensitive to that and intervene.
Right.
That's the majority of what we do. We deal with people who are in trouble day in and day out.
Right.
We don't deal with criminal mastermind international terrorists.
Yeah. So how big is the budget for the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office?
Well, I'm trying to remember exactly. I believe it's around 55 million a year.
And about what percentage goes to jail stuff?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. But
I read somewhere that was one of the biggest.
It is the sheriff's office is the second largest department in the county after social services, because they have a much larger budget, because they disperse all those benefits and funds.
Gotcha.
But in the jail is the largest portion of what the sheriff's office is.
Okay.
But one of the things that I talk about a lot is the overtime budget, right? So, at the jail we budget $4 million, roughly $4 million every single year to cover the cost of overtime. Every single year, we blow past that by another $2 million, right? Why can't we take $4 million of that and invest it back into our staff to create more legitimate career paths, such as a correction resource officer, somebody who is like a school resource officer but applied to the correctional environment. Mm-hmm. So we're creating deeper connections in the community, and we're offering support and encouragement so that people don't come back. So we can work with probation, we can work with the other county agencies to really make sure that people are successful when they leave.
Okay.
We're going to spend money on them. We might as well spend money so that we get some investment, some return.
Yeah. And I read somewhere online, researching you, that you had found $1 million in savings in the new Justice and Transition Center.
Yes. That's
what was I forget the story.
So, part of my responsibility was budgetary analysis, and so we have I believe the bond was around $140 million at that point, and for the new JTC, and so the construction managers presented us with their budget that they intended to use to justify drawdowns from that. And as we're all going through it, one of us who had experience in the restaurant business was like, this kitchen equipment is awfully expensive. And so what I did is I went back to the New York State Office of General Services website, and I located all of the equipment, and I created a parallel budget. And I realized that all this kitchen equipment, it's mostly just plumbing and electrical connections. We have electricians and we have plumbers who can do the work, and they're unions, so we won't run afoul of any project labor agreements. And so in my parallel budget, I was able to realize between $800,000 and $1.2 million in savings, depending on how crazy we wanted to go, building the walk-in freezers and coolers and such.
And then were those savings realized? I mean, I guess
yes, they were.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so that's just came about because you're kind of a wonk about all this. You're super detail oriented.
I am. I love to play around and tinker with stuff. And I'm a nerd when it comes to spreadsheet programs like Excel. So I really get a lot of satisfaction being able to play with those numbers and derive new facts and new information from analyzing those numbers.
And I gotta imagine that's like one of the biggest parts of the job of being sheriff, being CEO of this big department.
Right. Because you have to. It's good governance requires all government leaders, and that includes deputies and even the civilians that we hire to do the most menial things. Good governance says that all of us should be leaders and should be trying to protect the public's interest, to limit unnecessary spending when we can, to find and realize savings, and leverage economies when we can.
Right. And another thing I saw online is something about when you were in the corrections in the visitation department, you came up with some idea that nearly eliminated all contraband. Yes.
So in contact visitation, the inmates are
contact visitation, so it's not behind that pane of glass.
No. Although the incarcerated are entitled to a non-contact phone booth visit within the first 24 hours of their incarceration, but I believe they're entitled to 2 hours per week. And so what happens is family and friends come in, they get screened, and then they go in, they sit down, we bring the incarcerated folks in, they greet, then they sit down, there's a little barrier that makes it hard for them to pass contraband to each other. And then we monitor them, and then afterwards the inmates get strip searched before they go back up, and the civilians are released. So the majority of contraband substances comes in through contact visitation. And one method is called slamming, where a little balloon full of whatever the substance is, tied off, will be passed, typically orally, sometimes with a hand. And then from there, the inmate will remove it and then secrete it in the rectum. And so,
wait, all this is happening in the room where the visitation
it's very,
is
very
happening?
fast. It's very, very fast when it happens. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Or maybe swallow it?
Well, no, because nobody wants to have to dig through it.
Ugh.
It's much easier to just rinse it off.
So what did you do that decreased all the contraband?
Well, I realized that there was a correlation between bad behavior on the units and contraband smuggling. And so what I did is, based on inmate disciplinary history, I would target people for closer supervision. And what we would do is we would rotate them frequently enough so that they never knew when they were going to be on the hot seat, but they knew that it was more likely than not that they would be.
Uh-huh.
And so as a result, once again, people don't commit crimes with the expectation of getting caught.
Right.
Because they knew they were going to get caught, it stopped the introduction of unlawful substances and prison contraband in through the contact visitation.
So that sounds like super heads up kind of 21st century policing and big data kind of stuff.
It's just looking to see where patterns are and trying to
in
understand, and in the numbers, and then trying to understand, what are those patterns actually saying, and how can we get in the middle of this and stop the process from continuing. Right.
Well, that sounds amazing, and you sound like a fabulous candidate.
Thank you.
What else? We're running out of time. What last thoughts would you share, and why should people vote for you instead of the incumbent? And he's not even the incumbent, is he?
No, he's not. He's the acting sheriff.
Right.
Again, I'm not going to say anything bad about him. He's a good human being, and he works very hard. But here's the difference: if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. And if you want that, if you want nothing to change, if you think everything is going swimmingly, and you like the idea of spending extra money, and having a toxic work environment at the jail, and our sworn staff and our civilians not being paid sufficiently, then that's where you go. But if you want to reimagine how we do policing, how we do corrections, how we create durable systems so that 20 years from now we have fewer people coming into the jail than we have now. I'm very proud of the work that I did in helping realize the JTC, but I would also be very, very proud if I could help build a world where it wasn't so needed. Right.
Wow. Well, that's a great place to end. And we're out of time. And Jillian Hanlon, candidate for Dutchess County Sheriff, thank you so much for being here and sharing this hour with us. Everybody else, have a fabulous Friday afternoon and a wonderful weekend. And thanks for tuning in to radiofreerhinecliff.org.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. Such a pleasure.
Hey, one last thing. There's a fundraiser for you tomorrow here in Rhinebeck. And anybody who's listening tonight should email me, I guess, through the radiofreerhinecliff.org website. Find my show, Correct Me If I'm Norm. There's a link to email me, and I'll send you details on where to go for this fundraiser to hear you speak more.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to unveil a new speech.
Excellent. Fabulous. All right, everybody have a great weekend. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jillian.